Johnny Carson collapsed during his last interview with Bette Davis. Not from a heart attack, not from illness, but from something far more devastating. A truth so powerful that America's most composed television host broke down on live TV, unable to continue. What Bette revealed in those final moments wasn't about her dying body. It was about something Johnny had done decades ago, something he couldn't even remember. But that forgotten moment had saved her life. And she came back one last time to tell him before it was too late. July 2nd, 1989. The Tonight Show studio was preparing for what everyone knew would be historic television. Bette Davis, at 81 years old, ravaged by the cancer spreading through her bones, had insisted on one final appearance. Producers tried to talk her out of it. Her doctors warned against it, but Bette Davis had never listened to anyone in her 60-year career, and she wasn't about to start now. Because she had something to say, something that couldn't wait another day. What no one knew, not the crew, not the audience, not even Johnny himself, was that Bette hadn't come to reminisce about old Hollywood or accept one last round of applause. She had come with a secret she'd carried for 30 years. A secret about the night Johnny Carson saved her life without knowing it. And when she finally revealed it, the strongest man in television would crumble. But why had she waited so long? And what could Johnny have possibly done that he didn't remember? Stay with me, because what happens next will change how you see every small act of kindness in your life. If this story already has you hooked, hit that like button. You won't believe where this goes. Behind the curtain at NBC Studios, tension hung thick in the air. Stage manager Phil Torres had worked The Tonight Show for 15 years, but he'd never seen the crew this emotional before an interview. Makeup artists were crying. Camera operators kept checking on Bette in her dressing room. Everyone knew they were about to witness something profound. Johnny Carson sat in his dressing room staring at his notes, but he wasn't reading them. His producer, Fred Dordover, had briefed him an hour earlier. "Johnny, the doctors give her 3 months, maybe less. This might be her final public appearance anywhere." Johnny had nodded silently, then asked everyone to leave. He needed to be alone with his thoughts. Bette Davis and Johnny Carson had a history that spanned 2 decades. She'd appeared on The Tonight Show 23 times, more than almost any other actress. Their chemistry was legendary. She was sharp, fearless, brutally honest. He respected her because she never performed for him. She simply showed up as herself. Bette once told a reporter, "Johnny Carson is the only interviewer I trust because he doesn't want anything from me except the truth." But their relationship went deeper than television appearances. In 1959, when Johnny was still a struggling comedian in New York, working small clubs and barely paying rent, their paths had crossed in a way that neither of them spoke about publicly. It was a brief encounter, forgettable to Johnny, life-changing for Bette, and she'd carried that moment in her heart ever since. Now, 3 decades later, Bette Davis knew her time was running out. The cancer in her breast had spread to her bones. Every movement brought searing pain. Her daughter had begged her not to do the interview. "Mom, you can barely walk. Please, just rest." But Bette had gripped her daughter's hand with surprising strength and said, "I have to tell him. I can't die without telling him what he did." When Bette Davis walked onto the Tonight Show stage that July evening, gasps rippled through the studio audience. She moved slowly, each step clearly agonizing, leaning heavily on an elegant black cane. But her head was high. Her makeup was perfect. Her famous eyes, those piercing, unforgettable Bette Davis eyes, still blazed with intensity. The audience rose to their feet immediately. This wasn't enthusiastic applause. This was reverence, respect, love. They knew they were watching a legend make her final bow, and the weight of that knowledge filled the room like electricity. Johnny stood at his desk, and for just a moment, his professional mask slipped. His eyes glistened. He walked around his desk, something he rarely did, and gently took Bette's hand, helping her into the guest chair. "Bette Davis," Johnny said, his voice thick with emotion. He wasn't quite hiding. "Thank you for being here." Bette looked at him with those famous eyes and replied, "Where else would I be, Johnny? You're the only one I trust with what I have to say." The audience didn't know it yet, but those words were loaded with meaning that would soon shatter everyone watching. What was Bette really talking about? What secret had she been carrying all these years? The answer was coming, and it would break Johnny Carson in ways no one had ever seen. Drop a comment if you're feeling the emotion already. We're just getting started. For the first 20 minutes, the interview felt familiar, comfortable. Johnny asked Bette about her legendary career, and she delivered the sharp, funny, occasionally shocking stories that had made her interviews famous. She talked about fighting with studio executives, about male co-stars who tried to upstage her, about the time she told Jack Warner exactly where he could put his contract offer. The audience laughed, but every laugh carried an undercurrent of sadness because everyone watching knew this was goodbye. Every story felt like a gift. Every laugh felt precious. Johnny demonstrated why he was the greatest interviewer in television history. He didn't treat Bette like she was fragile. He didn't soften his questions or handle her with kid gloves. He gave her exactly what she wanted, respect and space to be herself. When she paused to catch her breath, he waited patiently. When she went off on a tangent, he followed. When she cursed, and she did twice, he laughed genuinely. But about 25 minutes into the interview, something shifted. Johnny had just asked Bette about her most famous role in All About Eve, expecting another entertaining Hollywood anecdote. Instead, Bette grew very still. She stared at Johnny with an intensity that made the studio audience lean forward instinctively. "Johnny," she said quietly, "can I tell you something I've never told anyone publicly?" Johnny's face registered surprise. In all their interviews, through all their years of knowing each other, Bette had always been an open book. What could she possibly have left to reveal? "Of course, Bette," Johnny said gently. "Whatever you want to share." Bette took a slow breath. The studio was absolutely silent. 18 million viewers across America sat transfixed. "I'm dying," Bette said with her characteristic bluntness. "I know people have been speculating, but I'm telling you directly now. I have cancer. Aggressive cancer. The doctors say I have maybe 3 months left." The audience gasped audibly. Johnny's composure cracked for just a moment, emotion flooding his face. "Bette," he started, but she held up her hand. "Let me finish," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I didn't come here tonight just to announce that I'm dying. I came here to tell you why I'm spending one of my last good days on this stage with you." The real revelation was coming, and it had nothing to do with her death. Subscribe right now. What happens in the next 60 seconds will leave you speechless. Johnny B continued, her eyes locked on his. "Do you remember the winter of 1959? You were performing at a small comedy club in Manhattan. The Bitter End, I think it was called." Johnny's brow furrowed. "I played a lot of clubs back then, Bette. I barely remember most of them." "I know you don't remember," Bette said, and her voice cracked slightly. "That's what makes this so important." She shifted in her chair, clearly in pain, but determined to continue. "December 18th, 1959. I was at the lowest point of my entire life, lower than you can imagine. My career was in shambles. Warner Brothers had just dropped me. I was 51 years old and Hollywood had decided I was finished. Done, a has-been." The audience was completely silent now. This wasn't the strong, defiant Bette Davis they knew. This was something raw and vulnerable. "But it was worse than just my career, Johnny. Much worse." Bette's hands trembled slightly. "My daughter had just been diagnosed with a brain tumor. The doctor said she had 6 months to live. I'd spent everything I had on treatments, on specialists trying to save her. And nothing was working." Johnny's face had gone pale. He was listening with every fiber of his being. "That night, December 18th, I decided I couldn't go on anymore. I couldn't watch my daughter die. I couldn't face another rejection. Another door slammed in my face. I'd written letters to everyone important in my life. I'd settled my affairs, and I was going to end it that night." The studio audience was crying now. So were the crew members, camera operators, sound technicians, producers. Everyone was frozen, tears streaming down their faces. "I decided to have one last drink before I went home." And Bette paused, steadying herself before I did what I'd planned to do. "So I walked into the Bitter End, just another bar to me. And there was this young comedian on stage. You, Johnny," though I didn't know your name then. Johnny was gripping the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. You were doing your act and you were bombing. I mean, really bombing, Johnny. The crowd was drunk and rowdy, and they weren't listening. They were heckling you. Someone threw a glass. I remember thinking, this poor kid is dying up there. Betty wiped tears from her eyes, not caring that her makeup was running. And then you stopped your act. You just stopped mid-joke and said something to that hostile crowd. Do you remember what you said, Johnny? Johnny shook his head, tears now streaming down his face. What Johnny said next would save Bette's life, but he had absolutely no memory of it. Comment, I'm crying if this is hitting you as hard as it's hitting me. You looked at that drunk, hostile crowd, Bette continued, her voice breaking. And you said, you know what? I'm bombing. This is the worst set of my life. But I'm going to finish anyway because someone in this room might need to see that you can fail and still get up and keep going. Johnny's face crumbled. His professional composure, the armor he'd worn for 30 years, completely shattered. He put his head in his hands and his shoulders shook. You finished your set, Johnny. With people throwing things at you, with people laughing at you, not with you. You finished. And when you walked off that stage, you walked right past my table and you looked at me. Really. Looked at me and you smiled, just a sad, tired smile. And you said, sorry you had to watch that, but at least I didn't quit. Betty was fully crying now and so was Johnny. And so was every single person in that studio and millions watching at home. You have no idea what that meant to me, Johnny. You have no idea. Here I was planning to quit on life itself, planning to give up. And this young comedian who just had the worst night of his life showed me that you don't quit. You finish. You keep going even when everything is falling apart. Johnny tried to speak but couldn't. His voice wouldn't work. For the first time in the history of The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson was completely unable to continue. I went home that night, Bette said, and I tore up those letters. I went back to fighting for my daughter. I kept auditioning. I kept pushing. And my daughter, against all odds, she survived. Johnny, the tumor went into remission. She lived. She had a family. She gave me grandchildren. All because I didn't quit that night. All because you showed me that finishing matters more than winning. Johnny finally found his voice barely a whisper. I had no idea. Betty, I had no idea. I know you didn't, Betty said gently. And that's the point, Johnny. You've spent 30 years sitting behind this desk making people laugh, entertaining America. But you need to know something. You've been saving people all along without even knowing it. The studio erupted in applause, but it was different from any applause ever heard on The Tonight Show. People weren't just clapping. They were sobbing, standing, reaching toward the stage as if trying to touch something sacred. But the most powerful moment was still to come. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. You need to see how this ends. Johnny stood up from his desk, something he almost never did during interviews. He walked around and sat down next to Bea on the couch, taking both her hands in his. Bette, he said, his voice shaking. I don't know what to say. That night was the worst night of my career. I went home and seriously considered quitting comedy. I thought I was a failure. You were never a failure, Johnny, Bette said firmly. You were human and your humanity saved my life. She turned to look directly at the camera addressing America. Listen to me, everyone watching. We spend our whole lives thinking we're not making a difference. We think our small moments don't matter. But Johnny Carson, just by finishing a bad comedy set and smiling at a stranger, saved my life. He gave my daughter 20 extra years. He gave me grandchildren I would never have met. Her voice grew stronger. You never know when you're changing someone's life. That kind word you give, that moment you choose not to quit, that smile you offer to a stranger, it might save them, and you'll never know. Johnny nodded, speaking directly to the camera. When you're having your worst day, when you think nothing you do matters, remember this. You might be someone's reason to keep going. The audience was on their feet applauding through their tears. Two legends sharing a moment that transcended entertainment and touched something eternal. But there was one final gift had to give him. Keep watching. The ending will stay with you forever. When it came time for Bette to leave, Johnny walked her slowly to the wings, supporting her weight. At the edge of the stage, just before she disappeared from view, Bette turned back one final time. "Johnny," she said loud enough for the audience to hear. "Thank you for letting me tell the truth, and thank you for that night in 1959 when you showed a broken woman that quitting isn't an option." "Thank you, Bette," Johnny replied, tears streaming freely down his face. "For showing me that my life meant more than I ever knew." Bette Davis died on October 6, 1989, exactly 3 months after that interview. Johnny Carson attended her funeral and spoke about their final conversation. "Bette gave me the greatest gift anyone ever gave me," Johnny said in his eulogy. "She showed me that we're all saving each other every day in ways we can't see." The interview became legendary. NBC received over 100,000 letters in the weeks following it. Mental health hotlines reported a significant drop in calls. People who'd been considering ending their lives chose to keep going. Inspired by Bette's story. Today, that interview is preserved in the Library of Congress as one of the most important moments in television history. Not because of celebrity or entertainment, but because it captured a fundamental truth. We are all connected in ways we cannot see, and our smallest moments of kindness ripple outward in ways we'll never know. Johnny Carson often referenced that interview in his remaining years. "Bette changed me," he said. "She taught me that every handshake, every smile, every moment I choose to keep going, it might matter to someone. And that's enough." If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel for more true stories that reveal the power of human connection. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their life matters, that their small kindnesses are saving people they'll never know about. And most importantly, don't quit. Finish your set. Smile at strangers. Choose to keep going even when everything is falling apart. Because somewhere someone you'll never meet might be watching, and you might just save their life without ever knowing it. Now go tell someone they matter. Don't wait. Do it today.